How do you bunch of pantless speed turkeys? Yes, I have been away again, but that's because I have a life. I'm actually in pre-production for a series I've created, so I needed a bit of a break to go focus on that. However, I've got a really important toots for you today. I'm going to show you the power of split toning, creating a look that pops its booty off the screen, something that shouts, shake it to the max. God, I hate that song with a passion. You ussy fatty na ya shot. Right, okay, if you're looking for one-to-one sessions, go book in with me over on Instagram. The link is in my bio. Let's stop fannying about, So first I'm going to show you the steps of how to create a look like this using rudimentary tools inside DaVinci, and then explain why it's not as sustainable as the new and improved Pro method. Good? Good. Right, so let me find a hero frame, maybe something like that, maybe over here. Yeah, quite like that. Let's leave the frame, our hero frame there, and the first thing that I'm going to do is disable all of the nodes that I have active, and I'm going to take you through it step by step so you can see what I did to get from these to these, as always. So the very first step is obviously going to be our IDT and our ODT. This was ARRI footage, so I've converted that to DaVinci wide gamut, made sure that my color settings also match this, and then put the output as Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. Simple stuff. Then I have a linear node for my white balance, but before I go ahead and activate this, let me activate my exposure. Then I went ahead and neutralized the white balance. You can see prior to playing around with white balance, it's much warmer of an image. Even if I take you over to the vector scope, you can see that there's far more warmth. Bar the strong cast of blue in this frame, you can see the image lives very, very warm. So I just neutralized it a tiny bit, and you can see that the skin tones have started to become more authentic, and everything just feels a slightly bit more natural to begin with. That's the key. Then I went ahead and added a little bit more saturation into this using my HSV node. So these three nodes do a lot to get us into that basic Rec 709 space. The real magic of where this starts to actually take life is in our custom curve when we start to split tone. Before I even got into that, I went ahead and used a stronger method to apply film grain. So if I just punch in here, take a look at all of this grain that you're seeing. Before it's applied and after, you can see there's a nice bit of halation that also enters the frame, mainly on the shoulder, and the image just blends a little bit nicer. The way that I'm creating this, if I just go into my effects, I'm using the film look creator. I disabled the entire color so you can see. Before I actually pull it back, it goes ahead and adds its own color. I didn't need that, so I pulled it all the way back, pulled back the film look blend, and the only thing that we have is this 35mm grain and halation, and I believe a little bit of bloom as well. So you can tweak these parameters to fit your taste. Let's get into the juicy stuff then, shall we? Let me just pull this custom curve up. There's a lot happening in this custom curve, and if you do not know how to control your custom curve, you are going to struggle so much. It's not even a joke. Like, this took me the better part of, I'm going to say maybe 2 going on to 3 hours just to figure out where I wanted this image to live and how I wanted to affect it in the high points, the mids, being able to protect the skin, which lives around here close to the middle gray, and then how I wanted to inject color into the shadows. You can see that I went and added a little bit more blue and green into these darker regions of this image, and then I took my green and blue point to insert that more tealish aspect into the highlights and essentially enhance that split toning. But this method itself took me so long, I cannot even put it into words for this video. This is gonna require a lot of experience. So even if we just keep this as our main split toning, let's go ahead and explore what that process would look like if we were doing it from scratch. So I'm just going to close this down. So let's go ahead and create a node prior to this, just so I can show you what the process looks like. Now I'm going to assume the role of the viewer here and take you through this split toning method, how I assume you guys will be going through it at home or in your studios. So the very first thing that you're going to have to do if you don't have a plugin or a DCTL is you're going to have to guess where that middle gray will live. Now I've explained what middle gray is in other videos, so if you're interested, go watch those videos and then you will be clued up as to what the middle gray point represents. I'm going to guesstimate to the best of my abilities where this middle gray lives, and I'm going to assume it's somewhere around about here, so I'm going to create a point there. Now what do I need to do? I need to add contrast into this image, so I need to start tweaking this luma, this Y channel, to be able to generate that contrast. So the very first thing that I'm going to have to do is lift up the shadow point quite aggressively, and then I'm going to take this high point and I'm going to start bringing it down to somewhere around about here. And let's just park that there. So then I'm going to start adding a little bit more depth into the shadows. And then I'm going to create a point here and start to lift this. And you can see now we're starting to introduce that contrast. So let's say we leave it somewhere around about there, just because I do still want some detail in the shadows, but I also want those highlights to pop. This is a music video, so it needs to feel high key, right? Cool. I'm gonna go ahead and break this chain, and now I'm gonna focus on my green channel first. So I'm gonna take this point that it's also generated, and I'm gonna start to introduce a little bit more green, and then I'm gonna go over into the blue channel and add a little bit of blue so it feels a little bit more tealish. I'm gonna take this red and I'm gonna drop it down a touch just so you can feel the effect of what I'm doing a bit more. But then I need to create another red point so I can protect areas of this skin. So the further this goes down, the more it's going to affect the skin. So you're going to have to create another point to be able to protect where the skin lives without losing the effect you're doing up top with the green and blue. So somewhere around about there, right? Then I'm going to take this bottom point and I'm going to start to just pull back on some of the red in that lower channel. Then I'm going to go back into my blue and I'm going to have to start injecting some blue into the shadows. And that's because when you think of film looks, the shadows aren't always clean. There is a tint in the shadows and it's generally of that blue cast. So I'm going to inject a little bit of that there as well. And this is honestly just, it's a back and forth, so you're gonna have to play around with it to find out what works best for the look that you're trying to create. Not everything is gonna be as apparent as what you might hope for it to be, and this is why it's gonna take a lot of time to get to where you want this image to live. I really like what it's doing to the highlights that are falling on the skin. That's where that split toning effect is gonna become more visible. So I'm gonna go ahead and inject a little bit more into that area, but not so much that it starts to feel unnatural. So something like that, right? So if I just minimize this now and I show you what we had before, that was before, this is after. And now if we just compare that custom curve that we've just created to the one that we had originally, you can see the original version is a lot more fine-tuned. It's a lot more precise. I spent a lot more time on that original custom curve, but this isn't bad. I've used a shit ton of experience that I've gathered over the years of color grading to be able to replicate a look close to the one that I had prior to this, just for the purpose of this tutorial. And we are starting to develop that split toning effect throughout the entire shot. So I'm gonna leave that there just for you guys to be able to see what's happening. And now for some reason this layer mixer is also enabled, so you can see that the layer mixer does a lot as well, right? Having disabled this layer mixer, comparing this secondary split tone custom curve to this one, you can see the difference is night and day. It takes a lot of experience to know what you're doing in this process of split toning, and it's not the easiest one to grasp, but it's gonna do a job, and it's gonna take a fucking long time for you to get there, but it is possible, which is why in the intro of this video I specified that this wasn't necessarily the most sustainable version of creating this look. But let's go ahead and see what this layer mixer does when we activate that. So on this bottom node, what I've gone ahead and done is I've created a magic mask. So the first thing that's happening is I'm adding a little bit more pop into the actual skin here. I'm lifting her out so she can feel like the primary focus as this is her scene, right? So you want to add a little bit more pop, and the way that I'm doing that primarily is through the gamma. So I'm lifting up the gamma and then I'm adding a slight influence of saturation by taking this middle point and pushing it towards that warmer section of the wheel. But then I'm also softening the highlights so these highlights can feel a little bit more three-dimensional. And then I'm taking this top node and I'm reducing the exposure around her to draw that focus into the center of this screen, specifically to her. One thing I do want to do now that we've gone ahead and created this custom curve, you can see that there's a lot of saturation coming through, and I'm not necessarily a massive fan of it. It feels too punchy, so I'm going to go into my HDR wheels and I'm going to take this global saturation and I'm just going to start to draw that back a tiny bit just to soften it up. somewhere around about there, and that feels much nicer to look at now. And I haven't even got onto the color warper yet, but for this shot specifically, because there's so many colors just embedded within this frame itself, the color warper isn't really going to help me the way that I need it to. So I'm just going to refrain from using the color warper here. But if I show you one of the other shots, for example, say something like this, and I've used the exact same process as what I used on the shot that we were working on and applied it to this, it took a while to fine tune it. But the color warper, now if I go into this and say I create a point somewhere around about, let's say here, and then I start to inject a little bit more of that teal, you can see I'm going quite far with it, right? And it's enhancing that split tone effect around the image. And look, we're still protecting some of the darker areas, specifically when it comes to the hair and the shadows, but it's just added that second layer of tonality and depth to the image, which is why these two tools in cohesion with each other, if you know how to use them and you can do it quick enough throughout your project, they're very strong. But this, again, is not as sustainable as this second method. Okay, so method 2, or what I like to call the gang buckaroo methodoso, or more commonly known as the Pro Wizzy. And I'm so nice with it that I've left you a link to go try the free demo of this tool so you can follow the tutorial in real time, and the link's in the description. Yerp. Cool. Now, watch how quickly we're going to create this look with this tool, and then you tell me in the comments which version crashes out harder, alright? So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go over into effects, we're gonna drag on a DCTL, and then we're going to click the look DNA. So you're going to be met by a bunch of options, right? So the very first thing that I'm going to do is show curves. And with this, I don't even need to guess where my middle gray is, because I've set my parameters down here, and automatically they will be set to DaVinci. But because I'm working within the DaVinci color space, I don't need to go ahead and set this. So my middle gray is going to be locked without me even having to guess where that is. And because we're trying to emulate the characteristics and properties, texture of film, the first thing that I'm going to do is in this section where it says preset, I'm going to go ahead and select Fuji 3513. And if you watched Kazi's recent tutorial, shout out to Big Kazman for giving me this idea to go ahead and show you how to use this tool on one of my own pieces, you'll understand that with the Fuji emulation, the colors are going to feel a lot richer and you're going to notice them more visibly. That's one of the major differences. But say for instance your flavor is Kodak 2383, you can go ahead and do that and it's going to give you a slightly warmer rendition. But because you know I like my grains, I'm going to go ahead and hit the Fuji 3513. So I'm going to take my mid contrast and I'm just going to start pulling that back a tiny bit just to soften up this image, maybe to around about somewhere like that. Yep. And then I'm going to take the black knit point, which controls the darkest regions of this area, and I'm going to add a little bit more density into that by bringing it back a slight bit like this. Yeah, somewhere like that. And just before I even do anything else, look at the difference already. The difference really is night and day. So now that I've kind of gone ahead and started to deepen those darker sections, I'm going to take the undertones and just keep watching the curve. I'm going to start taking that back to around about somewhere like this. Yeah, I like what it's doing there. And now I'm noticing that these highlights, they feel quite high key. You can even see on this metallic skirt, right? I do like what it's doing, but I just want to soften that highlight roll off so it doesn't feel like it's as in your face as what it currently is. So I'm going to take this highlight slider, I'm just going to start pulling back on that, and you can see, so if I go higher, it feels more high key. If I start to bring this down, it just softens everything up so nice, and it starts to blend those colors even more. Then I'm going to take the white point, the brightest, most specular areas of this image, and I'm going to start pulling it back. Keep your eye on this area where this cyan light in the background is, even this bright spot here, and even just looking at some of the areas on the skin as I start to pull this back. Now if we do a before and after, I can't even stress how quick that was as a process. And it all works within a system where you can push or pull this image as far as possible without ever having to worry about whether you're gonna break this image or not. So now this is before I've even gone ahead and done any color work. If you remember from the previous version, right, I wanted to kind of add a little bit more greens into the highlights. I wanted to take away some of that heat from the image. I wanted to accentuate some of the colors around as well whilst creating that depth. So I'm gonna go ahead and do something like that. So if you remember at the start of the split toning, I mentioned that there's a slight tint when it comes to the shadows, and that's generally going to be covered within this undertones area. So I'm going to take this blue point and I'm just going to start to lift it up and leave that there, because I don't want it to completely bask within this blue tonality, but I do want to add a hint of it. So I might even just pull that back a touch to around about maybe 190. which is nice. Then I'm going to take this area of the skin where it's warmer, and I'm just going to start to pull that back as well. So I'm just going to take the undertones somewhere like that, maybe just even pulling back on, adding a little bit more blue, a little bit more green in there, and you can see that it's starting to add that essence into those highlights. And I want the blue to kind of take lead here. You can go as far as you want, right? If you want to go all the way, you can, but obviously it's going to create really vivid looks. For me, I still want it to feel pleasing to the eye, so I'm just going to start to adjust these, and you can see in the brightest regions of this skin, when I start to pull that white point down, it's very noticeable. So I'm just going to have a little play around with it and find the area that I quite like, maybe something like that, pull back some of this and add some of that, and even start to bring back a little bit more of this. I say this to you in near every tutorial or every lesson that I do host. You're tastemakers, so when you're assuming the role of the colorist, you need to be able to create taste. Now, for me, I don't want her to look like she's ill. South Asian skin tones are beautiful, so I want to be able to protect that while still making it feel like it blends with the environment naturally. So I don't want to go too green with it, but for me, this doesn't look bad. Where this is, still feels quite natural. If you wanted to add a little bit more of that red back into it, you can. And then if you wanted to go a little bit more aggressive with, say, the highlight points, you can then go ahead and add a little bit more of that tint in. And because I prefer that cyan tonality of it, I'm going to mix that green and blue together, so it pushes more of a cyan feel into the environment and into the skin. So something maybe like that is nice for me. And this move that she's doing is how I feel when I'm using this tool. I'm going to go back to the other one, and let's just minimize this so you can see what the effect of this custom curve was in comparison to this. The difference is clear, and you can see there's a lot more green in this, and you're having to do a lot more work to protect the skin. So if you then wanted to go ahead and emulate a little bit more of that property, by all means, all you really need to do is go ahead and play with your highlights and play with your white point, and you can start to get even closer to the version you had when you had to do it completely manually and guess a lot of the work around where those elements live. Now, that's just part one. When you now look at this version, right, you can tell this contrast feels way more flat in comparison to how this renders contrast. And without blowing smoke up the arse of this plugin, it's better that I just show you the comparison of the previous version to the one that we're doing with this plugin. The saturation feels a lot nicer the way that it's rendered. Even the way that it blends the colors in feels a lot nicer. The only thing that we're currently missing is that enhancement of that cyan tealish color in the environment to just tie it all together. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go over to this area that I've labeled compress, and I've already set the parameters, but I want to show you the effect of it, and I've already set the parameters. As soon as I enable this, that tonality that we were adding back into the environment, again, night and day. And if I want to target an area that feels a little less green and is a little bit more cyan so it can match the tone that I've set, all I need to do is take this target hue and play around with it, and it's going to select the colors within that range. And then when it comes to the target saturation, I can set that a little bit higher, and the compression near. Once I take this slider, you'll be able to see what happens. So this is all the way back, and when I start to increase it, look at how it just blends that tonality into the rest of this image, and we're still protecting the darker regions of this, the skin tone, and even the colors around it. Like the reds don't feel like they're being egregiously infiltrated by this color, and I've pushed it quite far. So now let me just take away this selected color so you can see in full screen. Let's just maximize this. This is what we've just created in a matter of minutes in comparison to what we had to do manually. And even though this at that point looked really nice, it doesn't compare to this. And if this saturation feels a little bit too heavy for you, all you need to do is go back into the look DNA, and this saturation slider, I'm just going to pull this back a tiny bit, and I'm just going to blend the curves. So now, boom, boom. And I guarantee if you send this over to the client, they're going to be ecstatic with it. Considering the shit that you buy, whether it's the lenses, the monitors, upgrading your camera each month a new one is released, cages, gimbals, the Creative Suite license that rocks your puss each month, and those crusty look packs is for the purpose of making your creative life easier. It really doesn't get much simpler than this. I mean, if you've got the guapeni dinero, stop thinking about it, just shake it to the max. But again, bare mins, go try out the free demo version of the tool so you can see what it can actually do. But yeah, big shout out to the director Niz Shad for sponsoring my Morrison shopping with this project and footage. Go check him out on Instagram, get booked in for a lesson or two, tickle all the buttons on the video for me, and you know how we end it each and every time. Alright, cool. Chef Odd. Adios, punaños.